emulation as a whole just has gotten so complicated and very customizable and hyper-specific in so many different ways. For the newcomer, it can be kind of hard to decide how to start. What's the best way to get into it? And I hope this video is going to help you figure out what's the best way for you to start, and maybe just show you a few of the ways you can jump into this. Because there's so many different ways to get into this hobby that it could be kind of hard to figure out where you want to start. So let's just jump right into this with one of my first options you can probably start with. That being, just use your phone. iPhones and Android phones have gotten so powerful to the point where they're capable of emulation at such a high scale that it is truly more power than you truly need. And you run into the problem of not necessarily a lack of power, but a lack of utilization on the side of the emulators. Most of these mobile devices tend to be a lot more powerful than their emulation equivalents. For example, the most popular portable emulation device that I tend to recommend people is the Ion Odin 2 base model, which is a Snapdragon 8 Plus Gen 2, which is a couple generations old now, which, don't get me wrong, it's still a plenty powerful processor. Especially with active cooling, you can really push that thing hard, but that just doesn't exactly compare well to when you compare it to like the newest, Samsung phone with the newest and latest generation of Snapdragon chips, or even comparing it to an iPhone. It is just dramatically less powerful in comparison that it kind of feels weird that some people choose to go down that route sometimes. But there is some advantages when you do go with a dedicated handheld, such as being able to more customize it for specifically emulation. Sometimes it's the fact of having a dedicated device makes it more accessible and more likely that you're going to play it. But if you don't want to spend any money, it is a perfectly reasonable way to jump into the hobby. I know the first time I started doing emulation, it was on my brother's old Android tablet, and allowed me to play a vast majority of emulated titles, anywhere from PSP to even Game Boy Advance, N64, all those similarly basic titles for relatively modern emulation handhelds today. And it was a great experience, and it was a great way for me to really get a handle on what I want out of an emulation device. You can enhance the experience on mobile devices by picking up one of these controllers. Like there's the Backbone controller. The very popular option is the Razer Kishi that has tons of different variety. There's the Kishi 1, the Kishi 2, a very brand new controller from Razer that's straight up just a full Xbox controller on your phone, which, don't get me wrong, looks very nice, but it is very expensive. You also don't need a super high-end device to start understanding what you want from emulation. A device that I recommend if you want a dedicated handheld is probably the Anbernic RG35XXH. It allows you to get a handle on what you want out of the device. It is capable of performing relatively high-end emulation, but not the very highest end, so it allows you to figure out what you want to go down. Do you want something more powerful to emulate higher-end consoles? Or you could possibly go down the route of looking for a handheld dedicated for those simpler titles, like the Anbernic RG35XX Plus, or even something like the Anbernic RG28XX. A very small, very slim device, but is more optimized for lighter titles such as the 8 and 16-bit era, very light titles for PlayStation and stuff like that, purely because it lacks a lot of controls for that kind of game. A key part of when you're starting out is a lot of the times, is that you don't really want to invest in it in case you don't know if you're actually going to use it. So if you're just starting out, maybe buying something that you might not actually end up using all that much isn't worth it, so you utilize what you already have. I mentioned smartphones, but maybe you're already kind of a gamer, so you already have some consoles on you. So why not emulate consoles on that? You can take your 3DS or PS Vita and mod it so you're able to run emulators on it. Personally, I had a lot of fun using my PS Vita for emulators. It doesn't emulate a huge variety of systems, but it can emulate certain consoles very well. I love playing Game Boy Advance on my PS Vita. Also, original PlayStation and PSP games run phenomenally on the Vita. The 3DS is perfect for Nintendo games, Super Nintendo, Game Boy Advance, DS, and the 3DS makes a huge case for being one of the primary emulation devices you have, because there isn't a great way to emulate 3DS games on a lot of these handhelds, just due to the unique form factor that the DS has. So being able to play it on a native device is a lot more comfortable. Though the 3DS isn't the best when it comes to performance in a lot of these emulators, You can do PS1 games. I've seen some people say that it's gotten a lot better, but when I first tried it, it's not great, and I don't plan on really going back to my 3DS, because why would I go to my 3DS for PlayStation 1 emulation? I have a Vita. Another popular option for emulation is modding on your DSi. That is a great system for, if you already have it, to turn into a little emulation station. I'm a huge proponent of using what you have, not letting something go to waste and rotting away in a desk drawer, or even sending something to the e-waste bin. So utilizing what you have is one of the first main ways to recycle your hardware. And what I see and recommend a lot of people do is take an old Android phone or iPhone that they've had in their drawer or something, take it and turn it into an emulation handheld, mainly because it's just an efficient and cheap way to do it. Because if you like having physical controls, you could always buy one of the controllers I mentioned, a Backbone, a Kishi, even a GameSir controller that I've used a lot in the past. So those ways I feel like are probably the easiest and best ways to get into emulation, is just using what you have, whether that's a PS Vita, a Nintendo 3DS, DSi, or even an old Android or iPhone at this point. Do bear in mind though, iPhone is just now only really letting emulators onto the App Store, and there are certain problems with certain emulators not being allowed on the platform, like, mainly Dolphin, which is a Nintendo GameCube emulator, isn't exactly on the platform, mainly because iPhones don't allow just-in-time programming on the App Store. But to my understanding, it's for security reasons, but I think it's honestly kind of bullcrap. But the problem that comes from not being able to do just-in-time programming, so bear in mind, I'm not a developer or a programmer, so take this with a pinch of salt. To my understanding, the reason why just-in-time is so important is because it instantly recompiles in an instant the entire game's shaders, allowing the game to boot in the first place. But it's something like that, so take that with a pinch of salt. It is really disappointing not being able to run GameCube on the iPhone, but eventually I hope there's a way to get around this issue, but it is a massive downside. Phone, you also don't have Nintendo Switch emulation yet. At least to my understanding, there is no Nintendo Switch emulation, but that could change at literally any time. That's why Android devices make the most sense for emulation handhelds, because they have basically every single potential emulation app you could possibly ever need on that. And on top of that, if it's not on the Android App Store, you can always just sideload it, which is something that you're beginning to able to do on iPhone if you live in the EU and you have to jump through a lot of hurdles. So basically, Apple sucks still, but it's getting better. And Android has just been a haven for emulation for an incredibly long time. Emulation can be a very tedious thing to get started on. And there are so many hurdles with some of these methods you have to go through that you might find it's not worth it. But I hope this video helped you figure out what path is best for you, because I love emulation and I understand it can be a little annoying to get into, but hopefully this helped you narrow down what the best route is for you to do. My personal recommendation is use an old Android phone, because it's probably going to be super cheap to buy a controller, and you probably already have one somewhere in your drawer or something, and they're pretty cheap to pick up secondhand off of eBay. And if you don't have an Android phone, I suggest either emulating a console that you already have, so like a PS Vita or 3DS. I think that is a solid second option. But so what do you guys think? Has this video helped you in any way? I would love to hear what you guys think down below. And before we get to the outro, we hit my 1-year anniversary on YouTube. It's been an amazing year. The channel has grown so much, and I love seeing your guys' comments every day on my channel. You guys have radically changed my life, and I am so happy because of that. Thank you for my first year on YouTube, and here's to the next year. Don't forget to leave a like, comment, and subscribe. All the other social media garbage down below. And last but not least, have a wonderful day.